Hey everyone, this is Seth Parnell, the minister at the Portia Church of Christ, and this is episode 166 of the Midweek Bible Study. Hope that you are doing well. Hope things are going your way. We appreciate you being here on this really good Thursday night. It's been great, weather-wise outside. I got to go running today, and the weather was perfect for it. It was spectacular. Got to go to the park and look out across the water and everything down here in Jonesboro. It was a pretty good day on that regard. But hope that you've had a good day as well, and we appreciate you being here. And we've already got a couple of people in here. We've got Jackie Henry. I hope you've had a wonderful day. And we got the Dunlaps as well. Hope you guys are doing good. Always good to see you with us here tonight. We always want to give you an invitation if you're not from the Portia area, if you're not from around our neck of the woods, as you might say. If you're ever in the Portia area, then you have an invitation to come and see us. Right now, we are meeting at 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock on Sunday morning, 5 o'clock on Sunday night, and 6 o'clock on Wednesday night. And so you can come to join us for Bible class on Sunday morning and worship with us, or you can come Sunday night and worship with us, or you can assemble with us in our midweek gathering on Wednesday. Right now we are going through the book of Acts, and we just got to chapter 5, I believe, of the book of Acts, and we're taking a look at Ananias and Sapphira. And so if you're in the area, know that you always have an invitation to come see us at the Portia Church of Christ. We are located at 307 South Jackson Street in Portia, Arkansas. And so come see us sometime. We would love to see you and worship with you. Also, if you have any questions or comments about what we studied tonight, please feel free to put those down, and we would love to hear from you. We'd love to hear what you have to say, and as we continue to study the Word of God together. Or if you have any suggestions for future episodes, feel free to send those my way, as well. It's always good to hear from people and hear what your perspective is. But tonight we are going to take a look here at Numbers, chapter 20. And if you caught in the last two episodes that we've been taking a look at the provision that God gave to the Israelites in the wilderness. As you know, when the children of Israel were enslaved to Egypt for about 450 years, or about 400 years. And they were subjected to hard bondage. They were subjected to ill treatment, and they cried out to God for a deliverer. And God was someone who heard their cry, and he went and got a man by the name of Moses. And even though it took some convincing, Moses was eventually brought on board, and he would travel to Egypt to announce the fact that God had declared that his people were to be let go. And even though as Moses needed some convincing, the Pharaoh of Egypt needed some convincing as well. In fact, it took 10 plagues before he finally gave in and let the people leave his country. And even then, he would pursue them later on as they would get to the Red Sea. But every time, God would show his miraculous power and how his power is greater than any force that is here on this earth. Because the Egyptian military at this time was no joke. It was not something to be laughed at, but it was something that was formidable. It was powerful, but yet it was nothing compared to the might of God, as he provided a way of escape for the Israelites by crossing over the Red Sea on dry land. And then when the Egyptians tried to pursue, the waters came crashing down upon them, and they were all, destroyed. A destruction that would have taken like an opposing army. It would have taken hundreds, probably thousands of soldiers in order to do that. But God did it with simply just water. With just a body of water, God was able to do that. And so you see, the power of God that he has. But the Israelites would be taking this long journey to the land of Canaan, and a journey that was going to be pretty circuitous. They would uh, take the long way around, and they would be going to the land of Canaan in this kind of this roundabout way. But God knew what He was doing, because the people of Israel, they weren't the most confident, as you might say, as to make you this journey. And a lot of times when we think about making a trip, you might drive down for a day, or you might get on an airplane and fly to a far away town, or you might board a train or a bus. But the journey that these people took years. It took, months in order to get from point A, to point B. And so this was not just a short little trip, but this is, this was years of just travel and just getting everybody, to where they needed to be. And as you can understand, this caused a lot of problems logistically and spiritually as well, as they came into some obstacles. And so we're going to read a couple of verses here in Numbers chapter 20, and then we'll dive into. Probably won't go too long tonight, but we will see what this has to say and see what we can learn from it. And so here in verse 20, we have verse 1 is kind of like the prelude to the rest of the chapter. It kind of gives us a little snapshot of what happened beforehand. It says, "And the Israelites, the whole congregation, came into the wilderness of Zin in the first month. And the people stayed there in Kadesh, and Miriam died there and was buried there." And so we know that they had moved into the wilderness of Zin. They give us the date for it. And then they're staying at a place called Kadesh. And here is where Miriam, Moses' sister, dies. And so she dies and is buried, there at Kadesh. And so Moses and Aaron have to bury, their sister, and she is, of course, no longer, with them. And she plays a pretty big role in support of both Moses and Aaron. And even though she had her moments in which she lacked confidence in Moses, and she got kind of angry at Moses in a couple of cases, but she played a big role in the leadership, of the Israelites and in helping them, along. But she dies here in verse 1 of Numbers chapter 20. It kind of sets the tone for what the following chapter is going to be like. And so you go down here to verse 2, and starting here, up here, it says, now there was no water for the congregation. And so they gathered together against Moses and against Aaron, and the people quarreled with Moses and said, Would that we have died when our kindred died before the Lord? Why have you brought the assembly of the Lord into this wilderness for us? Why have you brought the assembly of the Lord into this wilderness for us and our livestock to die here? Why have you brought us up out of Egypt to bring us to this wretched place? It is no place for grain or figs or pomegranates, and there is no water to drink. And then Moses and Aaron went away from the assembly to the entrance of the tent of meeting, and they fell on their faces, and the glory of the Lord appeared to them. And so, like I said, if you caught the first two episodes, or the previous two episodes that we've had, and taking a look at the manna, and how the manna appeared before the people and was able to feed them for as long as that instance took place, all the way into the land of Canaan. They were fed by this manna, and they were fed by the quail that came up as well. Excuse me. But if you remember that, then this passage sounds really, really, really familiar, because they say something almost identical here that they said back then. They say, well, why have you brought the assembly of the Lord into this wilderness? For us to die here? Is this a graveyard for us? Have you brought us all out here in order to be killed? This is no place to grow fruit, or to grow vegetables, or to there's no water to drink. Why have you brought us out here? Moses, Moses, this is your fault. Why have you done this to us? You can say a lot of things have changed, from the last time, from the time of when the manna had come, but some things just don't change. And it appears the human nature, of these Israelites hadn't changed either. And so they give this kind of the same speech, to Moses by saying, why did you bring us out here? There's nothing out here, and we're going to die out here. What are you going to do in order, to fix this? And so Moses, this obviously, doesn't sit well with Moses and Aaron. But in verse 6 it says, Then Moses and Aaron went away from the assembly to the entrance of the tent of meeting, and they fell on their faces, and the glory of the Lord appeared, to them. Now, to give them credit, to give, Moses and Aaron credit in this case, what is the first thing that they do when they are confronted, with this problem? When these people, come to them, with this problem, and not just a problem, with also an accusation. Remember, this wasn't them coming to Moses, respectfully and saying, we're worried about not having enough water. What can we do in order to help this out? Or what can we do in order to ensure that we have what we need in order to finish this journey? They don't do that. They don't come to Moses like that, but they come to him, with an accusation. Saying, you brought us out here and now we're going to die. This is, your fault. And so that's kind of the tone of what they're putting out here in this case. But where did Moses and Aaron go first after they given this accusation? It says they go straight to God and they fall on their faces. And it says the glory of the Lord appeared, to them. And we're going to get to what God is going to tell them here in just a bit. But it gives a good example, for us when we're confronted with, some of the more unpleasant things, of life. Where do we go first? Where is our instinct of to go, when we are confronted with these things, when we're confronted with these problems, while either just or unjust. Sometimes we do things and it's, it is our fault and we have to face the consequences of it. And sometimes we may be accused of something that we haven't done, or we are mischaracterized in some way, and we're innocent, but we don't know how to communicate that. In either case, what should be our instinct to run to? When a child is hurt, when they're out playing or after running outside or something, and they fall and they hurt themselves, what is their first instinct? What is the first thing that they always do? They call out for mom or for dad, and because they know that they can come and they can provide comfort for that situation. They don't call for they don't call for the mailman, or for a teacher or for anybody, but they want mom and dad, because then they know that they can get care from that, and they know that their parents love them. And so when we confronted with these situations, what is our instinct to go to? Is it do we just kind of bottle it up, and do we try to solve it ourselves? Do we go to another person for advice, or do we look up advice on the internet? What do we do? I think we can learn a lot from Moses and Aaron in this case, in the fact that we need to turn to God for the first things first, and turn to God for the first, and then decide what to do after that. Pray to him, ask for guidance, and then move your path forward. That's something that I know it's something I could be better at. I know it's something that a lot of times we don't bring our problems before God, or we don't pray to God unless things are getting really bad, unless things are really out of our control. We'll pray to God then, but we don't really go to him first a lot of times in these things. But we need to be someone who is familiar with God, someone who is comfortable bringing all those different things of life to God, the good, the bad, the small, and the big. God is someone who cares, for all of that. In the grand scheme of things, you may feel sometimes bothersome, or you may feel like it's like it's unnecessary to bring those small things of your life to God. But when you think about it in the big picture, even the major things in our life, God who created the entire world, who created the entire universe, the billions of people that are here on this planet, God, he had a hand in creating all of this. Even the big moments in our life, in a big picture, is not really big to someone who created all of that, who reigns over all of that. But yet God still cares for us. And so either big or small in our life, we can bring those things to God, and we can approach him, and we can pray for, like I said, for guidance or for deliverance or whatever is going on in our life. We can pray to him for those things. And so we don't have to wait until something major in our life happens in order to start that conversation with God. But we can start immediately. And that, like I said, that's one thing that I can be better at. A lot of times I've been guilty of that myself. But we can be someone who needs to be comfortable bringing all manner of things in our life to God. But God's going to respond here in verse 7 to Moses' request. And in verse 7 it says, "The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Take the staff and assemble the congregation, you and your brother Aaron, and command the rock before their eyes to yield its water. Thus you shall bring water out of the rock for them, and thus you shall provide drink for the congregation and their livestock." And so God gives them a solution. He says, "Go and take your staff, you assemble all the congregation, you and Aaron, and look at this rock, and command this rock to bring water out of it." Now that's something that is, this is a situation where there will be no doubt about the power of God, because we're familiar with springs, we're familiar with different things like that, but in the wilderness there was no water. There was no water anywhere. And a lot of times you can take a rock, you can pick up a rock outside, and you can talk to it all you want, and no water is going to come out of it. That's just not the way that things work. And so God is saying, you're going to go out and you're going to speak to this rock, and it's going to provide water, and then all of Israel is going to be able to drink from it, and they will know that it was me who provided this for them. That was me who provided this water and sustained them throughout this journey. If you remember last week, we talked a little bit about God being a sustainer, about one who sustains us going forward, and how he sustained Israel. And so this is the instructions that God had given to Moses. He says, talk to this rock, and it will provide water before them. And so even though they had complained, and even though they had made this accusation to Moses, yet they were able to God's going to provide for them here in this case. But in verses 9 and following, things don't necessarily go according to plan, but rather Moses is going to do something different than what God had called him to do. And even though Israel is still going to benefit from this, it's going to be costly for Moses himself. And so starting here in verse 9, it says, "So Moses took the staff from before the Lord, as he had commanded him. And Moses and Aaron gathered the assembly together before the rock. And he said to them, Listen, you rebels, shall we bring water for you out of this rock? And then Moses lifted up his hand and struck the rock twice with his staff, and water came out abundantly, and the congregation and their livestock drank. But the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, Because you did not trust in me, to show my holiness before the eyes of the Israelites, therefore you shall not bring this assembly into the land that I had given them." And so here we find that Moses does something a little bit different than what God had told him to do. God told him to go out and speak to this rock. It will provide water, and this situation can be put, behind. There'll be no doubt in the eyes of the people that I have provided for them, because a normal rock doesn't flow out water, and especially not enough water to feed, thousands and thousands of people, that were here, and animals, and all the amount of water that it would take, to completely, to sustain, this many people and this many animals is a lot. It's a lot of water. So it's not just going to come from, just a simple, spring. Of course, as opponents, of the miraculous nature of the story oftentimes say, well, they just came across, a spring, and Moses just uncovered, a spring, that was there by striking the rock. But this would take a lot of water in order to feed, or not to feed, but to sustain, this many people and this many animals. And so this was a miraculous, occasion, by God. And so he tells them to do this, but Moses, it says that he takes his staff, and as they gather the assembly, and in verse, number 10 here, he makes this, he kind of talks back to them, and he says, listen, you rebels, shall we bring water for you out of this rock? Moses addresses them as rebels, as people who had, rebelled, people who had gone against God's instruction and had not followed what they needed, to follow. And so he says, shall we bring you water, out of this rock? And he's kind of answering to this call for him to, to prove that he didn't just, bring them out into this wilderness to die, but he's leading them, to the promised land. And then it says, Moses lifted up his hand and struck the rock twice, and his staff, and water came out abundantly, and the congregation and their livestock, drank. And so in the end, it worked. God still provided, for the people, but Moses didn't exactly follow what God had told him to do. And God's going to tell him what this is going to mean for Moses, going forward. And so in verses 12 and 13, at the end here, it says, but the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, because you did not trust in me to show my holiness before the eyes of the Israelites, therefore you shall not bring the assembly into the land that I have given them. These are the waters of Meribah, where the Israelites quarreled with the Lord, and through which he showed himself to be holy. And so, as we know, because of this, Moses was not allowed to lead the people into the promised land, but he was able to go up on a mountain and see the promised land from a distance before he died. And that was what Moses was able to do. But it'd be Joshua who would lead the Israelites into the promised land, finally. And Joshua, who was a great military leader, would be the right man for the job here in this case. But a lot of times, people have sympathy for Moses, and they have, it seem like a harsh punishment, but as we know, we can't, put ourselves in the place of God and say that God's judgment is unwarranted, because we know God's wisdom is so much more than ours. But Moses, he didn't follow what God had told him to do. And because of that, it appeared that Moses was providing this water for the Israelites and not God. And even though I don't think Moses intended for that to be the case, that's what happened. A lot of times what we intend and what actually happens is sometimes, two different things. And that can be for good or for worse. But good intentions aren't enough in order to, provide, real change and to make real progress. It has to back up, with the reality of what we do. And Moses, in this case, put the spotlight, maybe unintentionally, we don't know, on himself, and said, must we bring water for you? And that came at the cost of putting, the spotlight on God and allowing God to be shown as holy here in this case. And if you remember, verse 1 that we took a look at the beginning, that showcases kind of the prelude to the rest of this chapter up here in Numbers chapter 20. We know that this comes right after, Miriam, Moses' sister, dies, as Miriam, died there and was buried there. And so Moses may have not been in the best, emotional state. He may not have been in the best, mindset, grieving the loss of his sister. And so that may have played a factor into his reaction, to this situation. But nonetheless, he was someone who made a mistake in this case, and he was not allowed to go into the promised land as a result. And so we always need to be careful that we ourselves, don't make the same mistake that Moses makes, here. And whenever we are blessed by God, whenever we are being someone who can tell people about the blessings of God, that we make sure that God is the one who is shown to be holy and, not ourselves. And like I said, sometimes that can be unintentional. Not many, there may be some, but there's not many people who go out there and say, who are intentionally, prideful and intentionally want all the spotlight, on themselves. Like I said, I'm sure there's some out there, but most Christians don't want that. We want God to be glorified in what we do. We want to shine a light that reflects on His holiness and not ourselves. But we need to be careful that our actions match that and not just our intentions. We want God to be glorified with our actions and not just our intentions, because you can intend to do this, that, and whatever, but in the end, nothing comes of that if we don't follow through with what our intentions mean. And so we can intend to be humble, we can intend to give God all the glory, but unless we actually back that up, then nothing's going to come of that. And so we always need to make sure that we are pointing the direction back to God, that we give God the glory for all that we do and all the blessings that He has provided for us. We always shine that light back to Him, because the extent of our own effort and our own work is sometimes quite limited, but because of the blessings of God, we are able to do some great things here on this earth. And that's a wonderful thing to note. And so whenever we are faced with these situations, we always need to remember to go to God first, to go to Him, and to be someone who is comfortable bringing all manner of things in life, to God and having that conversation with Him. And we also need to be sure to give God, the glory. We need to shine the light on Him when it comes to the blessings that He provides and the good things that we can provide for people. God has blessed us, and we have responsibility to bless others. And so we don't want to take credit for something that is rightly due, for God. And our intentions need to match our actions, and our actions need to back up our intentions, because sometimes those are two different things. But I think that is all we're going to take a look at here tonight. We spent a lot of time with Moses and with the Israelites, and with some lessons that we can get from here. And so probably next week we're going to kind of move away from that and take a look at a different story. But appreciate everyone being here on this Thursday night. Hope that you have been good, and hope this is a lesson that has been beneficial to you. And as always, like I said, if you have any suggestions, feel free to send them my way. If you have any, feel free to share this with anybody if you think that they could, benefit from it. And we'll look forward to seeing you next week, Thursday night, 7:00. And we'll be having some more guests on here in the future, and so I know that's going to be a good thing to note. But till next time, hope that you can go out and be the light of the world and glorify God in everything that you do. Catch you next time.